Joining me now from some remote volcano in Japan is James Corbett. I would just stop there because everyone should know who James is. But for those that don't, he's an award-winning investigative journalist, founder of the world-renowned Corbett Report, which provides podcasts, interviews, articles, and videos about breaking news and important issues from 9/11 truth and false flag terror to the Big Brother, police state, eugenics, geopolitics, the central banking fraud, and more. CorbettReport.com is it. If you've got questions, you can drop them in the chat. Welcome to TNT Radio, James.
Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Is this your maiden voyage on TNT, or have you been on before?
I am racking my brain. I think this is it. So thank you. Thank you for introducing me.
All right, you've been initiated into the brotherhood, and so, well, you put out so much in-depth analysis, and because we're all busy, I tend to let your reports accumulate, and then every few weeks I'll binge watch everything to catch up on double speed when the kids are sleeping until like 3 a.m. You recently put out a great piece on BlackRock, and I sort of wanted to shoot the breeze and get your big picture view of where we're at on geopolitics, globalism, biosecurity, and so forth. And we have similar views, I think. We chatted on my podcast a while back. And, maybe with geopolitics first, looking at Ukraine, Russia, China, the multipolar world, there's no shortage of false flag operations. We just had one recently with the Ukrainian missiles flying to Poland. What's sort of your take where we're at there?
Well, here's the very, very latest as we are speaking live here on, the 22nd of November here in Japan, 21st for people back in the U.S. Area. The very latest is that apparently, according to Reddit and other reputable sources of information like that, oh my God, guys, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly has just declared Russia to be a terrorist regime, and they're implementing some sort of new strictures and systems against it, and passing various resolutions condemning Russian aggression and blah, blah, blah. But except when you actually... So this is being pushed by Euromaidan and other obviously partisan sources like that at the moment. But when you actually go to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly page, you find that Zelensky gave an address to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly today, and then they passed some sort of mealy-mouthed resolution of basically calling on allies, NATO allies, to agree what's the actual? I should get the actual reading here. It's not even going to be here. Passed a series of resolutions calling on the 30 NATO allies to intensify backing for Ukraine's resistance and support the country's integration into Euro-Atlantic institutions. In other words, a giant big nothing burger. Wow, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly passed a big resolution today calling on the states to basically do what they're continuing to already do. It's absolute meaningless garbage, but when you filter it through the social media hype phase, it suddenly becomes some sort of big meaningful thing, and you have the galaxy brains over in Reddit and other social media spaces pontificating, oh, this means they're about to blame them for sabotaging the Nord Stream pipeline, and it's all going down, guys. So unfortunately, this is the state of what's going on over there, which is to say just nonstop partisan propaganda. And to be fair, I think the partisan propaganda comes on both sides, and you get obfuscation and ridiculous stories coming on both sides. We just saw, of course, the retreat from Kherson. And what did we get for after Russia was promising, absolutely, guys, you are now part of Russia. We're there for you. We defend you. Suddenly they turn tail and run, and everyone who was in any way cooperating with Russian presence there is now being rounded up, presumably tortured and killed, but... Of course, the Western media won't report on that part. But anyway, Russia has just completely abandoned any pretense that they were going to stick up for that particular region and the people who are living there. So it's just a mess all around. And there is, at this point, here's the real, if you want the real macro perspective, the real question in this should be, what's the out? What is the out for Putin and for NATO that they can back down from this and both claim to have saved face? And that is becoming harder and harder to even contemplate at this point. How's it going to end? That should be what the entire world is concerned about right now. But unfortunately, it just seems like every single news cycle is just an excuse to ratchet up the tensions.
Yeah, it seems like they're upping the ante, and as they use that phrase, off-ramp, there seem to be less and less off-ramps. We're going to jump to our news break. We'll be right back. The latest post on Corbett Report is a flashback from 2010 with James, your interview with Michael Murphy and J. Edward Griffin. And that made me think. I interviewed the late Michael Murphy in 2012. So he did great work. And so, the geopolitical, as you were saying, they just seem to be upping the ante from Nord Stream, Crimea, Dugina assassination, now these missiles flying into Poland. It seems like the West just wants to escalate things, and then I don't know exactly what they're shooting for, like literally World War III. And as you say, Russia is, I think, weaker than it portrays itself, and they use a lot of propaganda and the alternative media, Telegram and whatnot, to make them look stronger. And yeah, I've got no idea how this ends. And any further thought on the geopolitics before we?
Well, yeah. Let me just say that yes, you're exactly right. I don't think the West wants it to end, of course, because I think this is Afghanistan 2.0. Let's draw them into some trap and basically keep them bogged down there, and more of attrition, and over years we'll basically collapse the regime. Yay! So I think that strategy is fairly obvious. On the other side of it, I truly, truly do not understand what Putin thinks he's going to get out of this at this point, or in what way this is going to come to an end. This whole the special military operation, don't call it a war, guys, or we'll arrest you, is about denazification of the Ukrainian state. How's that going? Meanwhile, they're doing prisoner swaps, giving away most of their Azov prisoners in return for a few people from Russia. I mean, it's on its face. There's no stratagem here. There's no sense that there is some sort of end goal in mind on the Russian side of it either. This is just madness. But unfortunately, it's madness that plays beautifully, perfectly into what we were talking about on your podcast before. Not just the biosecurity state, which of course both Russia and the West are 100% on board with, but also the Great Reset. Because obviously this plays into all of those agendas. The destabilization of the energy supply in Europe, and the economic effects of that, the supply chain disruptions, all of it just... boy, does that serve the bug burger agenda.
Yeah, we just saw French President Macron this week or over the weekend call for a single global order. Basically, he said one world government, and that's how we translate it. And when we say it, we're crazy conspiracy crackpots, but when he says it, he said single global order because he said we have this Chinese, probably / Russian and U.S. order. We need a single global order, and just as you said, using the pretext of war and whatnot to get us all to come together and sing Kumbaya. And I think my two big focuses are world government, global governance, and the biosecurity state, which I like to call the algorithm ghetto. And just in Latin America, for example, recently we saw Lula win in Brazil, and he's been calling for a SUR, a common currency for South America. And Rafael Correa, the ex-Ecuador president, came out and said, we need to create an EU-like South American Union. And the Mexican president just last month was talking with Blinken and openly said, we need to integrate Canada, US, and Mexico, just like the EU. And then, Macron saying we need one world government. And then we got the G20 meeting. I'm sure you've been looking at that in Indonesia, where the ministers were calling for the implementation of one global WHO-approved vax certificate digital passport for the next pandemic. So, what are your thoughts on all of these?
Yeah. No, you raise such a good point there, which is, I'm sure, something that everyone in your audience and my audience would have picked up on, but it needs to be underlined, is that this is a stratagem that is employed by the propagandists on the other side of the ledger, as it were. When we say it, it's absolute baseless conspiracy theory. We say, oh, look they're trying to construct a one world government. They're calling it a new world order, blah, blah, blah. Total conspiracy, crackpot nonsense. But when they say it, hey, let's construct a one world order under a new world order, then that's totally fine, totally reasonable. When we say, hey, look, this is going to turn into vaccine passports that'll be integrated into digital IDs that will be used to control our movements. Crazy. You think Bill Gates is trying to microchip people with vaccines? You're an insane conspiracy theorists, when they come out and say, hey, we need the WHO to do a global vaccine passport system, then it's like, oh, that's totally reasonable. So we see this over and over, even with regards to that flashback that I just posted. When we talk about stratospheric aerosol injection, oh my God, that's absolute crackpot lunacy. But when, I don't know, John Brennan gets up there as ex-director of the CIA and talking about the need for, it might be a good idea to be spraying things in the sky to dim the sun. That's just of course the CIA is looking at it. So we need to really, I would say, highlight that as it happens, because as has become the meme online in the past couple of years, I need new conspiracy theories because my old ones all turned out or are all fact now, or whatever I wish I knew what that meme said, but people know what I'm talking about.
We don't have to highlight it because YouTube does it for us. I don't know if you caught, we had the World Government Summit a while back, and it's World Government Summit. And the title of one of the talks was New World Order. And YouTube actually flagged it. It's conspiracy theory. So, it's just so Kafkaesque. And, what's your, any further take on the vaccine passport? That's the thing that freaks me out the most, because it was Article 23, I think, of the G20 agreement. And it's implying you won't be able to travel at all anymore. You'll be stuck in Japan. I'll be stuck in Mexico. I'll probably by land. Using a narco submarine, be able to go back and forth between the U.S. But it's
was that a narco submarine or anarcho submarine?
No, narco submarine. You can Google search that on.
We all live in a narco submarine. Sorry.
Hey, there's a. I just gave you a free inspiration for a future song for you, but. It seems like they're coming hard and fast. The digital ID, the cashless. Your thoughts on their advance?
Yeah. This is so utterly, incredibly important. And as I have been saying for years now, what we have lived through really, truly, at base, was the precedent-setting time for a number of things. And one of the big precedents that is already, we're starting to see take shape out of this, is the global vaccine passport system. They're now, as you say, calling for it at the G20. Hey, we need the WHO to operate a global vaccine passport system. And we know what this is. We know how this will be used. We just saw exactly how this will play out in the, as we're told constantly, the next pandemic, because this was a once-in-a-century unbelievable event, but it's suddenly going to take place every few years now, because that's what's needed for the global government agenda. And, of course, as horrible as that is, and the limiting of people's movements across borders, of course it doesn't end there. This is really just the thin edge of the wedge of the digital ID, which is, I think, the real capstone of the pyramid of all of this, because that will be control of every person down to the individual level, their movements, their transactions, their interactions, where they can go, what they can talk about. That is how the total technocratic lockdown, the digital gulag, will come into place. And so that's, I think, what we need to be absolutely focused on at this moment.
And out in the UK, Seek for Truth does great work, and he just tweeted what was exactly on my mind. He said FTX was a false flag to usher in CBDCs, and from the very beginning, my thesis has been that by hook or by crook, wittingly or unwittingly, Bitcoin and cryptos were a Trojan horse to bring us into the CBDCs, and now you see them collapsing these exchanges, saying, "Oh, look, all these people losing money." It's the classic false flag strategy. What's your take on FTX and all of this, the collapse of all these exchanges happening at the same time that the Federal Reserve is running pilots with 12 central banks to usher in the CBDC?
Right. Well, I hope people would go back and look at my work. I've done, for example, an article and I believe a podcast episode. Was it a podcast episode as well on the Bitcoin psyop? I also did a questions for Corbett on the Bitcoin psyop, and yes, it was a podcast. So I've done some work on this, and I hope people will go back and take a look at that, because my fundamental thesis is that it has been a psyop to try to convince people that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and blockchain and CBDC and all of these things are all the same thing. And it's all just this one thing, so that eventually they'll be able to, they'll crash some exchange somewhere and then tell you, okay, now here's the official government-approved digital money, and here it is, and it'll be the CBDC. So in a sense, I'm in accord with what you're saying, but in a completely other sense, I think it's important to understand the distinctions that are going on here. Saying that the collapse of FTX, which was a stupid Ponzi centralized crypto exchange, is in any way reflective of cryptocurrency itself or the idea, is part of that psyop. It would be like saying, oh, Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008, therefore the US dollar collapsed. No, the US dollar has nothing to do with Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was one particular bank that was operating in a stupid way that collapsed. That did threaten to melt down all this derivative toxic subprime mortgage nonsense and all of that, but that was the sort of financial side of it. Same way with FTX. It's a centralized it's a centralized exchange, which has nothing whatsoever to do with Bitcoin itself or with cryptocurrency. But people have been psyoped into thinking that exchanges are cryptocurrency. I think we need to break through that conditioning, because if we do not understand what is at stake here in the difference between centralized and decentralized currencies and what an exchange is or how it operates, we will absolutely be tricked into essentially going down that CBDC path, which is absolutely the wrong path to take right now.
And you recently wrote about BlackRock in a 2-part series. I haven't been able to read it yet, but just, for you, what is, because this is related to what we're talking about, the CBDCs, BlackRock, there's, ESG, and they're just eating up the world. BlackRock, what's important for you when it comes to, Larry Fink and so forth?
Yes, for people who haven't been following it, yes, Larry Fink has essentially taken over Wall Street, if not the entire financial world, over the course, certainly of the past decade. Now with the $10 trillion plus under management of BlackRock Inc. directly, and then through their subsidiary, which is it uses the Aladdin software system. It's insane. It's absolutely unthinkable. How did he get into this position? That's part of what I'm charting in this series. It's going to be a 3-part series. I've so far released the first 2 parts, but at any rate, that is what I'm charting. But what's coming next, as you will allude to there, is the ESG social credit score nightmare. Because for people who haven't been watching, one thing that Larry Fink has been stressing in his annual letters to CEOs, which he writes every year, is ESG, social, corporate governance, environment. Basically, these are going to be the new metrics, and BlackRock is all on board with that. And when you have $10 trillion under management, you can start to throw that weight around to start to shape start shaping investors' decisions on what's important and how they report metrics and things like this. So I'm sure your audience is already familiar with the ESG scam and what it is about. But ultimately, this is the social credit system that we're always warning about, the Black Mirror style social credit, but on a corporate level. And that is already being slotted into place. Really, the only question left for these would-be controllers of the world is who gets to run it and who gets to choose the metric and thus decide essentially the course of human civilization. And I think Larry Fink wants to at least have a seat at the table for that conversation.
We've seen some pushback in states like Louisiana and a few others which said they're pulling $500 million or $1 billion of their funds out of BlackRock. Although I did recently see Canada Pensions say they're going to be pulling money out of firms that don't abide by ESG, which is actually not even legal. And I had a friend over the weekend who works here in Mexico. He works for a company that's owned by India, but that they started getting the ESG checks, and they were asking them for their electricity bills, and they wanted everything individualized. And they're like, well, we just get one electricity bill for the entire building. Most of the things they were not able to provide, for this ESG sort of investigation, because they were even asking about, how many trans people do you have employed and all of these things. So it's already starting to seep in. we're going to take a break. Again, the website, James Corbett, is Corbett Report. That's 2 T's, CorbettReport.com. We'll be right back after this break. And we're back with James Corbett on our final segment. His website is CorbettReport.com. From there, you can subscribe to his Substack, and of course, donate to keep him, to support him and keep him doing the great work that he's doing. Just on that final note regarding the ESG, I was mentioning we saw some pushback, but do you take that serious, or do you see BlackRock just marching ahead?
It could be serious. Let's put it this way. If I think the public was informed on this issue and understood the implications of it and where this is heading, I think it could be one of those things where politicians always love to jump out in front of a parade and pretend that they're leading it. So the real question here is public opinion. And if public opinion is overwhelmingly, A, well-informed on this issue, and B, against the ESG metrics that are coming into place, then I think there could be a significant movement against it. At the very least, you could see pockets of resistance here and there that I think could detach themselves from this new corporate control grid that's coming in. However, do you think we are at that level of public understanding? I tend to think not. That's part of why I do what I do, is because I think we need to inform people of what the real agenda is here, because of course it's going to cloak itself in all whatever the buzzword of the moment is. Hey, we're all on board with people's human rights, and we're all about saving Mother Earth, or whatever you guys are into these days. That's what this is about. We have to show that no, there is a much deeper and darker agenda to this, and I think a well-informed public would be able to put up real resistance to this, and that would be reflected by, like in Louisiana or wherever else, where they say, well, we'll stop investing in BlackRock or ESG compliant corporations. We'll see about that. I don't know if it's... At this point, I'm not exactly holding my breath for that, but I think that the mass awakening is happening, and we've got to do what we can to help spread this information to, I think, the people who would be interested in hearing this.
Very good. More optimism. And I wanted to get your thought on elections. I know you're Canadian, but we have got the stuff going on in the U.S. We had the primaries. There's shenanigans, they say, going on in Maricopa County. And then in Brazil as well, Lula by a hair apparently beating Bolsonaro. But apparently there's a lot of people out on the streets. And now in Brazil, people protesting Bolsonaro's loss are having their bank accounts frozen. And so what do you, in some regards, I can't say, but it wouldn't be difficult to come to the conclusion that the election was stolen from Bolsonaro. If that's the case, then it just seems like this globalist Soros machine is just perfecting their ability to meddle with election integrity across the planet, from Canada to USA to Brazil, and it's just on that front, we're losing. Do you have any thoughts on what's going on with the elections in the U.S. or Brazil?
Well, I am a Canadian in Japan who is also an anarchist, so my levels of detachment from this election system are multiple. But here's what I think is important from that. You just alluded to that incredible story happening in Brazil right now, where protesters against this election results are having their bank accounts frozen. Where have we seen that before? Oh, that's right. Of course, Canada broke the seal on that particular technocratic tool earlier this year. And now we're going to start seeing that normalized, as if that's the thing you do when there are mass protests in a country, right? So that to me is absolutely bone-chilling. Regardless of whatever voting machine tells you whatever the results supposedly were from whatever rigged selection there was in the first place, that means nothing and will change nothing. I could care less. But hey, imagine like the incredible ramifications of the normalization of this freezing bank accounts. And of course it will always be done to a few people at a time, just to sort of test the waters, but it is coming for everyone else. And this is exactly feeding into that global vaccine passport / social credit / digital ID / digital currency, digital gulag that we were talking about earlier.
And I've been mentioning that to people here in Mexico. I was citing the case as well of Alina Lip, who was recently on TNT, a German journalist out in Ukraine, Crimea, and she had her bank account frozen by Germany / EU, Berlin and Brussels. And then they closed her mother and father's bank account, who have nothing to do with anything. And then the bank manager, her mother, in an interview was saying, what do I do? I can't buy food now. And the bank manager just coldly says, just go to a church or something and ask for food. But when I tell that to people here, like my PayPal was frozen by the Department of Homeland Security. This German lady and her whole family have their bank accounts frozen, and they're like, oh, that's nice. Like, back to my Netflix. Like what you just said, people are not registering it. Like they don't care because it's happening to you, this other person, but they don't get that this is going to become a normal part of society very soon, and they just don't care.
I would say the common theme of what we're talking about here is that people will perish for their ignorance, for their lack of knowledge, and that's why the only thing that will actually change anything is to fundamentally change the conversation and to awaken enough of the population to these issues. And we are having that effect. And that's why, as I state constantly, that's why they are working so hard to censor voices like yours, like mine, from these mainstream spaces. They do not want us out there because every time there is a fair fight between truth and lies, truth tends to win. It really does. And I've seen that myself over the years. Literally, it never fails to astonish me. Just some random guy in Japan from his living room with a beat-up old laptop managed to build up an audience of nearly 600,000 people on YouTube, tens, if not hundreds of millions of views around the globe. Incredible. I would never have imagined that in my wildest dreams. So, of course, what do they have to do? They have to come in and start censoring, deleting channels, algorithmically limiting your reach, making it so you can't post Corbett Report links on Facebook or whatever other shenanigans they're playing today. Of course, they have to do that because we are having an effect. So that's why I'm here doing what I do. I can't say how this is going to turn out, but I know that if we give up what we are doing, and if the people out there who are supporting our work and helping to get this message out to others, if they stop what we're doing, I know we will lose. So it's an easy choice for me as to how to proceed.
And in terms of resistance, I was just thinking about this the other day. Here in Mexico, for example, we got a population of 125 plus million, and people are marching over the past weekend. They were marching for different reasons, electoral issues, and just imagine if you don't need that many people. If it was like 5% of Mexicans, that'd be like plus 5 million. They can't kill. The government can't kill that amount of people. So you just need a couple percentage of the population. No.
Yeah, I really do think that is the case. Most people, most of the time, are going with the flow. And the flow, if the flow changed, or if their perception of what that flow is changed, they would go with that. And I think that's what explains almost every sort of revolutionary change that we ever see, is just people perceiving, oh, there's something different happening now. Okay, I'm on that bandwagon. So yes, it is the few percent on either side of an issue that really do make the difference. And we could be that few percent if we understood and acknowledged our role, our power, how many of us there really are, as opposed to how many they tell us there are. Oh, you're a weird fringe minority. There aren't many people out there like you. No, there are, but they are keeping you divided from each other in every way possible, not just by algorithmically censoring and limiting your reach and ghost banning and shadow banning and all of that, but also by the psychological manipulation of groups to get them fighting with each other. I agree with you about 99.9% of what we believe, but that 0.1%, I can't believe you don't believe that, you're a shill, I hate you, is unfortunately all too common in this independent media space, as I'm sure you probably know by now. So unfortunately, the people who seek to rule the world have spent a very long time, centuries at least, really studying human behavior and psychology in order to better manipulate people and keep them divided. We need to come together. People who understand the gravity of the moment that we're in. This is not about personal egos or your share of some alt media space or whatever it is. This is about saving the human species. I am not joking when I say that. This is what it's about. So I hope people understand the hour of the time. We do not have much time left. The digital ID grid and all of this is coming into place. We need to act now. Come together. Stop with the petty, stupid squabbling and infighting, and come together on the most important issues of not just our lifetime, but presumably the course of human civilization. And if you put petty squabbles and things ahead of that, then you are certainly not on my team, and unfortunately that makes you my enemy.
Yeah, this is bigger than, World War II, World War I. This is the final revolution. You mentioned independent
As I
media.
often say, this is World War III. For people who don't understand what World War III is, we are in it, and we are the targets, and our governments are the ones waging it against us.
That's it. And, in terms of independent media, real quick, we got 2 minutes to midnight. It seems to be still going strong. We got these alternatives, Rumbles are rising in viewership. Odyssey Library lost its case from the SEC, but any thoughts on how alt media, independent media is doing at the moment?
Well, I am just heartened by the fact that people are looking for alternatives. People now understand that, yes, these are controlled platforms, although weirdly enough, I've seen even people in my own audience saying, YouTube is getting better. They're not censoring as many people now. So there's always backsliding, but I think more people are aware that at the very least, there is censorship going on. This is an issue, and they are looking for alternatives. I hope that they inform themselves about those alternatives, and maybe the Peter Thiel money behind Rumble and the sort of censorship Rumble does. Maybe we don't want to get back on another centralized platform. But at the very least, people are looking for alternatives, and that is part of the win.
Yeah, that's one reason I didn't want Substack, and I have my own website, but because Substack is also centralized, and you don't know tomorrow what's going to happen with Substack, but I think I'm going to open one just as well. All right, last 1 minute left. Any final thought? And then again, best places for people to find you and support you.
People can find me at CorbettReport.com, CORBETT report.com, and all of my work is available 100% for free. I only ask for people to support the work if they are regular listeners or viewers and they like it. So, but on that note, if there's anyone out there who likes this type of alternative media and what you are doing and what TNTRadio is doing, I hope they will support you as well, because I know how much effort goes into this and how it's not exactly the life of luxury that people do when they do this work, but we're doing it because we care about the future of humanity. So I hope you'll support whoever your favorite independent media producer of choice is.
Yeah, TNT does accept donations, so you're always on point. James, thank you. CorbettReport.com. Keep on listening here.
Thank you.